Tonight, we begin with a development that Social Security experts, retirement analysts, and senior advocates had feared, predicted, and quietly tracked for years. A shift that unfolded not over a decade, but in a single benefit cycle. A single cycle that left millions of Americans staring at their monthly statements in disbelief. A single cycle that exposed a gap between what retirees were promised and what they are actually receiving. A single cycle that changed the financial reality for tens of millions of households across this country. What the Social Security Administration revealed this year crossed a line that retirement policy analysts had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, the numbers did not lie. They responded with clarity, precision, and urgency. For months now, there had been signals, not official press releases, not formal government briefings, just signals that the Social Security payment structure was preparing something quietly unprecedented. The Social Security Administration has been methodical, yes, but they have been selective in their methodology. Their adjustments have followed a certain pattern, a formula, a rhythm, almost a script. But what set off alarm bells in retirement planning circles this year was that the pattern went silent. Experts who monitor benefit disbursements know the indicators: the cost of living adjustment announcements, the wage base increases, the bend point recalculations, the sudden shift in how high earners versus average earners are ranked. All of that went quiet, or at least was buried so deep in technical language that most beneficiaries never saw it coming. And whenever the system goes quiet on benefit structure, it means something is about to get very loud for the people receiving those checks. Earlier this year, financial analysts and policy watchdogs detected what they described as a significant divergence in Social Security benefit rankings, including payout gaps that had not been this wide in over 15 years. These are the kinds of disparities that the Social Security system only produces when it is signaling something very specific: an imbalance in how different work histories are rewarded, a structural tilt towards certain income brackets, or a quiet erosion of benefits for those who played by the rules their entire working lives. Observers didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that the 2026 benefit rankings were changing the financial posture of millions of Americans. And when a system that touches 70 million people shifts its payout structure without clear public explanation, even by a small margin, every financial planner, every AARP chapter, every kitchen table conversation pays attention. The concern raised by senior financial advocates this year was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was not political theater. It was urgent, because for many Americans, Social Security is not supplemental income. It is the income. Expert after expert described the 2026 benefit gap as stark underreported, and perhaps most importantly, correctable, if people know what to look for. But information only helps if the person receiving the check knows what questions to ask. Many do not. In fact, the data released this year confirms something retirement advocates have suspected for a long time. Millions of Americans are receiving Social Security benefits below what they are entitled to. Not because of fraud, not because of error, but because of timing, strategy, and a lack of information. Tonight, analysis confirmed that the 2026 Social Security rankings reveal dramatic differences across 5 major categories of beneficiaries, including a cohort of early claimers who locked in reduced benefits that had recently been flagged as structurally disadvantageous for what analysts believe was a short-term cash flow decision. Here is what the rankings show. Those who claimed at 62, the earliest possible age, receive on average up to 30% less per month than those who waited. For a beneficiary entitled to $1,800 at full retirement age, that early claim can mean receiving just $1,260 instead. Those who waited until 70, the maximum delayed retirement credit, can receive up to 32% more than their full retirement age benefit. For some, that is a difference of over $700 per month. Over 20 years, that compounds into 6 figures. Widows and survivors are among the most underpaid groups in the 2026 rankings. Many do not know they can switch strategies, claiming one benefit early and switching to a higher benefit later. Divorced spouses with marriages of 10 years or more often have no idea they are entitled to claim on their ex-spouse's record, potentially doubling what they receive. Public sector workers subject to the Windfall Elimination Provision are frequently blindsided by reductions that were never clearly explained when they were hired. In other words, the system targeted the uninformed. The component that would have made these benefits optimal, knowledge, was simply never delivered. This is what makes the 2026 rankings so urgent. The gap isn't just a number. It represents real money, real retirement security, and real choices that can still be corrected. And here is where the story becomes even more consequential. Researchers now believe the Social Security Administration's current benefit calculation structure was designed to reward patience, to test the financial resilience of claimants after decades of moderate economic instability. The system wanted to see whether Americans would claim early out of fear or need. And for millions, they did. But instead of a penalty being the end of the story, the opposite is now being revealed. For many retirees, there are still strategic levers available, and advocates did not hesitate. Consumer financial advocates didn't look the other way. They published the rankings. They mapped the gaps. They created tools so specific, so detailed, that even beneficiaries who claimed a year ago can begin to recalibrate. You don't get the Social Security Administration's attention easily. But in 2026, advocacy groups did. Policy analysts speaking with major financial publications under anonymity described the system's complexity as a deliberate optimization maze, a structure designed to extract maximum administrative efficiency while minimizing proactive guidance to beneficiaries. But informed retirees proved this year that they remain both adaptable and assertive. Their actions were not only timely, they were precise enough that congressional staffers began fielding calls from constituents who had just learned they were underpaid. That matters because it shows the system is responsive. It shows that retirees are not passive recipients. They are stakeholders, and they vote. As reports continued coming in throughout the first quarter of 2026, we learned more about the true scale of the benefit gap. Early claimers represent nearly 35% of all new beneficiaries each year, and the majority of them claim without a professional consultation or a break-even analysis. Women are disproportionately underpaid in the current rankings, largely because they are more likely to have interrupted work histories, lower lifetime earnings, and longer life expectancies, all factors the current formula handles poorly. Minority retirees operating in industries that historically underpaid into the Social Security system reportedly face compounded disadvantages used by the formula to calculate lower base benefits. This wasn't just a paperwork problem. This wasn't just a communication failure. This was a structural inequity. This was a gap with real names and real addresses behind it. And structural inequity is the one thing the 2026 rankings have finally made impossible to ignore. For every reassurance that Social Security is sound, advocates have countered with data that complicates that picture. Remember, policymakers thought the complexity of Social Security claiming strategy was a feature, not a flaw. They thought that breaking even calculations and spousal benefit coordination were problems only financial planners needed to understand. They thought that most Americans would simply claim when they retired and receive what the system provided. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. Millions of Americans are actively auditing their projected benefits. Advocacy organizations are producing free tools, calculators, and one-on-one counseling sessions to close the information gap. And for the first time, Social Security strategy is a phrase being spoken at kitchen tables, not just in wealth management offices. What makes this moment so significant and so urgent is that the 2026 benefit rankings arrived at a time when the Social Security system itself is under enormous political pressure. One faction wants benefit cuts to preserve long-term solvency. Another faction wants expanded benefits funded through increased payroll taxes. A third faction wants to means test benefits for higher earners. A fourth wants automatic cost of living adjustments tied more aggressively to healthcare inflation, which disproportionately affects seniors. The Social Security Administration is balancing these competing demands while managing an aging demographic wave, a strained trust fund projection, and a beneficiary population that is more informed and more mobilized than at any point in the program's history. And when systems in that position make quiet structural adjustments, they are not doing it from a position of strength. They are doing it from pressure. They are doing it from the weight of converging forces that no single policy decision can fully resolve. The Government Accountability Office's latest report, now widely distributed, was designed to signal that policymakers are not willing to allow systemic underpayment to continue unaddressed. Officials stated plainly that the current benefit claiming structure was inconsistent with the program's stated goal of income adequacy. That is bureaucratic language for, we know the system is failing people who were never given the tools to navigate it. You don't usually hear that kind of admission from a federal oversight body unless something with significant political and financial stakes has come to the surface. Meanwhile, senior financial advocates addressed the public in a clear, direct message this week. They said, "You earned these benefits. The question is whether you are claiming them correctly." They said, "The difference between claiming at 62 and waiting until 70 is not just a timing decision. For many Americans, it is a six-figure lifetime difference." And they said, "The rankings exist. The data is public. What has been missing is the translation, and that translation is now available." These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from organizations that understand just how high the financial stakes have become for an aging America with insufficient retirement savings outside of Social Security. Here is what makes the situation even more pressing. The 2026 Social Security underpayment problem is not isolated. Along with the core benefit gap, roughly 9 million eligible Americans are not claiming benefits they are entitled to at all. Medicare, premium surcharges are quietly reducing net Social Security income for higher earners who may have crossed income thresholds without realizing it. Inflation has outpaced the official COLA calculation in healthcare spending, meaning real purchasing power for beneficiaries has declined even as nominal checks increased. All of this happened within the same fiscal cycle. When a system moves multiple pressure points at once, it means something larger is underway, and the 2026 rankings are the moment that pressure is becoming visible. Analysts are now considering several possibilities for what comes next. One is that Congress will act in the next 18 months to simplify the claiming process, mandate clearer pre-retirement benefit counseling, and fix the Windfall Elimination Provision, a reform long promised and long delayed. Another is that the Social Security Administration will launch a proactive outreach campaign targeting the most underpaid demographic groups, particularly women, minorities, divorced spouses, and public sector workers. A third possibility, the one energizing advocacy groups the most, is that individual Americans, armed with the 2026 rankings data, will take corrective action themselves, adjusting their claiming strategies, filing for benefits they did not know existed, and demanding the full value of what they paid into the system. Today, the data took that passivity off the table. People are not waiting. They are not guessing. They are not accepting the first number the system hands them. They are asking the right questions. What we are watching now is a test of financial literacy and of accountability. The Social Security Administration wants to see how many Americans will accept the default payout without question. Informed beneficiaries want to show that the days of passive acceptance are over. Advocacy organizations want to prevent another generation of retirees from leaving money on the table. And Congress wants to prevent this conversation from becoming the defining retirement security crisis of the next election cycle. Tonight, we have heard from financial planners and Social Security advocates who are now fielding unprecedented volumes of inquiries. They say the 2026 rankings have triggered more benefit review requests than any single publication in recent memory. They say that approximately 1 in 3 people who run a personalized benefit calculation discovers they could receive more through a different claiming age, a spousal strategy, or a benefit type they were unaware of. And they say the decision to publish the full rankings transparently, publicly, and with actionable guidance attached is likely part of a broader shift in how Americans engage with their retirement entitlements. Advocates are not retreating. In fact, they are accelerating. Their work this year, rigorous, transparent, and urgently communicated, sent a message to the Social Security system that accountability is not optional. And it sent a message to every American approaching retirement that information is the most powerful benefit of all. As 2026 unfolds, we expect more details to emerge about precisely how the benefit gap widened, which demographic groups were most affected, and what systemic changes may come next. But what we do know is that the publication of these rankings was timely. It gave retirees the data they needed to ask better questions. It exposed a structural problem that silence had protected for too long, and it created a moment where individual action is not only possible, it is consequential. What happens next will depend on what each beneficiary does in the coming months. If they review their claiming strategy, this moment will be remembered as the turning point when American retirees finally claimed the full value of their contributions. If they wait, the system has already shown it will not correct the gap on their behalf. And tonight, for the first time in years, the Social Security system appears to be on notice. Washington is paying attention. Advocacy groups are mobilized, and the data is public, too public to ignore. And when a system this large is put on notice, it means policymakers are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, millions of Americans learned something some of them have known for years, and many are learning for the very first time. Your Social Security benefit is not fixed. It is a function of strategy. The rankings are not just numbers, they are a map, and you can use it. And the difference between the top of that ranking and the bottom is not fate. It is information. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The most valuable Social Security benefit available to you is the one you claim correctly. The most expensive mistake in retirement is the one you make without knowing there was a better option. And the 2026 rankings have made sure that "I didn't know" is no longer an acceptable answer. We will be here, watching every update, tracking every policy shift, and bringing you the information you need as the next phase of this story unfolds.